proudly presents the Horror Hit Podcast.
What's going on, everybody? This is Jimmy, and this is episode 185 of the Horrific Podcast. Today, we continue that Legend series that I talked about, us getting some really cool interviews and lecture recordings, for lack of a better term, in today's case, because it's not really an interview, it's more like a self-interview lecture with director David Fincher, who talks about filmmaking, talks about marketing, talks about script writing. He gets into a lot of different things. That is a really cool thing, man. So if you can hear the music playing in the background, the first bit of news. I gotta thank everybody who came out on Saturday for our 25th anniversary of The Crow meetup at the State Theater. It was really well put together, well received, a lot of fun. The podcast from it is already up and available for you to check out right now. And the State Theater and us, we are having a series of meetups throughout the summer. The first one, really, though, takes place in Riverbank. That'll be a double feature day, Toy Story 4, followed by Child's Play 2019. Then the 28th, we have the Alien meetup. The 13th, we will be doing... The 13th of July, we will be doing Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And the 24th of July, we will be doing Jaws with the Just As Good podcast at the State Theater. The Late Night Horror series is a whole lot of fun if you are a horror fan and you want to see some of the films that maybe you're too young to have gotten to see them on the big screen, or maybe you just want to see them again on the big screen. It is a great opportunity to do so if you are in the Modesto or Northern California area. Coming out this summer as well, we got some other stuff. This Friday, Netflix has got a film that looks terrifying in like a Suspiria kind of way. Hard to watch kind of way, called Perfection, about a musician who's going to school, and the trailer itself, like, she is has like some disease that looks like it's just rotting away her arm, and her friend says, "You know what you have to do," and she cuts her arm off at like the elbow. It's gnarly looking, like curses and witchcraft and all kinds of stuff going on. I look forward to checking that one out. Netflix has a problem with finishing shows. I've come to that conclusion. Netflix's shows, their series, they kind of let me down, Stranger Things aside. So Stranger Things aside and Black Mirror aside. Black Mirror, though, I don't count as much just because each episode is its own story arc. It starts at, you have your lean forward moment or your catch, or you have your, resolution, all within, an hour to hour and a half. But there's series, like Chambers, for example, with Uma Thurman. This was like Uma Thurman's coming back party. Like, it was such a cool story, creepy, supernatural, good story. And they completely rushed, and rushing led to just botching the ending of this story, Chambers. I would give it like a 7.75 in what could have been an easy 9 out of 10 because they tried to set it up for season 2 instead of worrying about season 1's ending. And I probably won't watch season 2 if it's going to go in the direction that all signs point to it going at the end of season 1. So, teach their own. If you saw Chambers, shout us out. Let us know what you thought. I also just saw John Wick Chapter 3. Not really horror, but it's definitely kind of under the umbrella of our network. Gotten a lot of mixed reactions from people when I posted how much I enjoyed it online. The majority said they also liked it a lot. Some people said they hated it because it was a big fight. The whole thing was like a huge fight sequence, which essentially it was. But if you watch the previous 2 films, you would know why that is the case. And one complaint that I got was there was no story structure, which is stupid. Like, I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. That was a dumb thing to say because there is story structure in it. Anyway, that's what I got for you guys, kind of news and housekeeping wise. Let's get into David Fincher, man. He's director of Seven, which I have a relationship with based on the film that I did, Door to Door, Seven Deadly Sins. This guy's style is unparalleled. It is, something that I guess you could compare like someone like a David Cronenberg to him, but he's very unique in his approach, his style, and his philosophy in filmmaking. And I found that this talk was very interesting. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. David Fincher.
If I do my job right in prep, I always feel like the shooting should be boring. The previs aspect of this movie is not what made the on-set part excruciating as much as there were so many technical things to, a child actor has to be gone in 6 hours. She can only be on the set for so many hours at a time, and then she has to go back into school, and then she has to be there for a certain, so you have that, you're juggling that. Then you have a room in the middle of your soundstage that looks like a fucking NBC Studios. It's running every videotape feed of every monitor that's switching back and forth that goes to the panic room, and we have multiple panic rooms. And so you have, so you're setting up a shot in there. You have to get the actress, the minor actress out and back into rehearsal. And then one of your tape machines goes down and now you don't know when that's going to be back up. And you've got a leak that's happening in the kitchen and the flooring is screwed up. And so in that respect, this movie was just plagued. The movie was a drag to make from that standpoint. It wasn't that the movie was boring because I'd already made the movie. I did feel like I made the movie 3 times. But I'd rather be prepared and bored than excited and, hemorrhaging cash and looking like a fucking moron. Previs at this point is expensive. But, the prices of it, like the prices of visual effects, the prices of it will come down. It's simply 21st century storyboarding. That's all. Your expectations are different on the first day of shooting than they are on the 100th day of shooting. On the 100th day of shooting, you're like, if I can finish this and not shoot myself or anyone else around me, I will have done good work. On the first day, you're trying so hard to kind of like make sure that this gets polished and that gets polished and that you're building on the right thing and you're so I don't really first days to me are usually sort of debilitating because I kind of go, oh, God, I forgot. It's not going to go like clockwork. It's a fucking movie. It's just like all those movies. It's just like all those other movie experiences. It's just going to be a lot of plotting and hard work.
What are you doing?
So, usually for me, it's like the reality begins to rear its ugly head. And you go, oh my God, look at all this perfect previs and look at all these great little close-ups I have designed and these storyboards. And now look, these actors, for some reason they can't get through 8 pages of dialogue in 3 minutes. What is wrong? So I go through that. I go through the whole, how disheartening. It's just like normal movie
That's like
making.
10 or 12 meters.
The hardest overriding reality is that, you read something, you read a script and you go, oh, that would make a neat movie. And then you're never going to enjoy that movie in the same way that you did reading it that one time. Because then the second time you read it, of course, you know it. And the third time you read it, you're breaking it down and starting to go, well, who would I get? And how would I do this? And then you go and you take a year, in this case, the case of this movie, a year to shoot it. Starting and stopping and building the set and previs and all that stuff. It took like 9 months of pre-production, 6 months of shooting, 8 months of post or something. The thing that got you excited is the first thing lost in a 2-year process. The reason you wanted to do it is the first thing that you have to jettison in terms of your enthusiasm. And you're always trying to hold on to that memory of what it was like when you first read it and were excited by it. And then, of course, the rest of the time, for the next 2 years, you're not excited by it. You're just behind and over and behind schedule, over budget, not getting the work the way you want it. It's not as succinct as it should be. You add another camera and trying to figure out a way to get it set up ahead, and all you've done is make things take an hour longer to light, and so now you might as well be shooting the other setup and all that. I don't know if this movie is specifically a footnote movie. I sort of feel like all movies, you got to kind of go in with the idea that this isn't the one that defines you, because I think people get too caught up in the legacy that they're leaving, and that's why I sort of like thrillers. I like this movie because it's not really about crime or any kind of sociology. It's really, it's just it's a lurid thriller. It's a Friday night movie. It's not supposed to be that important, and I think that a lot of people get questions when you release a movie that, what were you trying to say? It's like, I don't know. I was trying to say that 2 chicks got caught in a closet and 3 guys tried to get in and they burned the place down. But I don't know. I guess the footnote movie aspect is that it's not supposed to be taken too seriously. What Hitchcock once said, I'm not making slices of life, I'm making slices of cake. And I think that, it's important to, we're not curing cancer. We're just making a movie with actors pretending to be burglars. I remember reading the script and going and flipping the pages till I got to the part where she goes out after the cell phone and then she tries to find it and she tries to grab it and it slides further into the bed, and I was sitting there going, oh my God, you can't do this. And then she knocks the lamp over. It's like, no one will sit still for this. And this is one of the things that I think David Koepp is really great at, and he just smiled and he said, if you're going to make a movie like this, and this is a date movie and it's a Friday night movie, you got to have her go for the cell phone and you got to have her miss it, and it's got to continue to slide. She's got to knock over the thing. They got to hear it and they got to run up the stairs. I said, okay, look, if we're going to do this, then I'm going to do it in slow motion. And he said, okay, now you're with the program. Now you got the right attitude. It's like, if you're going to do something as kind of bald-faced as this, you've got to just go all the way and make it as, if you're going to pander.
No, we won't.
I think casting's a big part of the job in that there are certain tangible things that an actor as a human brings to a role. I think that Forrest would have a hard time playing somebody who is evil. He genuinely doesn't have that. I think it would be hard for Jared Leto to play somebody who is naive, because he's just not that. Jodie Foster can play a lot of things. Stupid ain't one of them. Actually, there was a movie we were talking about doing at one point. I wanted her to play Marion Davies, somebody who was generally thought to have been sort of ditzy and not particularly bright, but all of the people who knew her thought she was really sharp and really insightful. And I love the idea of somebody really smart playing somebody who, and let her try to cover up the fact that she's really smart. And then as we get in closer and closer, you're going to kind of go, oh, wow, there's really something going on in there. So I think each actor is a buffet, and there's certain things that you're going to ask them to do. In most cases, it's on display. You're just editing. You're just kind of going, really, you think chips and guacamole here? I was kind of seeing sort of like the teriyaki tenders, Maybe start with that and then go to like a deviled egg. There's a whole thing that they have to offer, and it's sort of your job to not lead them toward the thing that they can probably do well, but it just isn't appropriate. So, yeah, I don't know that casting is 90% of the job, but I think casting is good casting and good writing never hurt a movie. What's that line from Death Trap? It's so good even a talented director couldn't fuck it up. So that's it. I think you try to kind of get to a place where enough things are in motion that even a talented director can't fuck it up. The end of 7 is all handheld because it feels like that's what should be happening at that point. This movie, I wanted to say to the audience, this is all very measured and intended, and then do things like have people have seizures and have people get their fingers cut off and have these horrible things happen. And there's like a sense of, I think it instills or creates sort of a sense of dread for the audience when they go, everything I'm seeing is very specific, and now the victims are mounting. I just love the idea of this omniscience. Like the camera doesn't give you, it just goes over here kind of perfectly, and then it kind of goes over there kind of, and it stays with this person, and it doesn't have any personality. There's no, oh wait, let's see this over here. This might be interesting to somebody. There's none of that sort of documentary kind of feel to it. It's very much like what's happening was doomed to happen. And I like that as the sort of psychological underpinning of the staging. Straw Dogs is a movie I've always admired because it's so visceral. It's funny, it makes women hate men and men hate women in equal measure. And it's got to be one of the best Peckinpah movies, and here's our homage to the poster. I wanted to make a movie that had, where the brutality meant something, where it didn't just, and that's a pretty good model for that, because that movie is truly brutal. I often liken a movie crew and the making of a movie as it's like a team and their season. And it's difficult, once you sort of set a pace or you set the relationships on a set take on a kind of, hopefully, a productive momentum. And when you start and stop, and you have to go back and reshoot stuff. We did a lot of reshooting. We had a lot of problems with Panavision and their lenses. We had a lot of equipment failure, and we ended up reshooting days of material on this movie for Technicrane, slopping Technicranes, lenses that would go out of alignment and lose focus when they were tilted down a certain number of degrees. Nicole getting hurt. We had makeup problems with certain things. We had staging problems. We rewrote some scenes and went back and redid them so we could get other information. So we reshot probably 9 days. We had 15 days of stuff that we had to reshoot when we lost Nicole. But we had probably 9 days of other stuff, just technical stuff. And when you're trapped in one house and you have to go back and redo things that you've already done and redo them, it becomes really hard on people. You got 90 people there who are all kind of like, they don't feel like they're making any progress. They're caught in frozen molasses, and everybody's nerves get frayed. I think on this movie we had 2 or 3 instances where people had to be escorted to their cars by security because they were so at their wits' end. It's an enormously complex movie, and it took its toll. And there were a lot of people left in its wake. It's like a football season or a basketball season. You discover, how deep your bench is. People go down, and people who are expected to perform at a certain level, things get in the way of that, and some people rise to the occasion, and, you win some, you lose some, and some are rained out. And on any given day, you're trying to not only do the work, but you're trying to accomplish something at a certain level, and it's not always possible. There are games during the 100 days it takes to make a movie that you're going to lose by 2 points. It's hard. There are scenes, I watch this movie now, there are scenes I beat my forehead pink, thinking, my God, what was I thinking? Like, that was I so dressed up and nowhere to go. It was so overly overbaked. I've only made 5 movies now, 4 movies, I don't know, 5 movies. So I haven't really made that many movies. I mean, by the time Hitchcock was my age, he'd made like 40 movies. So it's, Spielberg's made 35 or something like that. The one thing I've learned, and of course it's totally disingenuous, is that maybe the way to do it is to set a pace. Maybe you literally take the first 3 days of shooting, you schedule all the stuff you just don't give a shit about, and you shoot it as fast as you can so that everybody kind of goes, oh my God, that's the pace we're going to be working at? Yeah. And then you go back and you reshoot it at the end of the schedule somewhere, because it's stuff that you never really, but you kind of get everybody used to a way of working. And I started this movie off, with so much previs and pre-production and meticulousness that we kind of hit this pace of, we were getting 10 setups a day, 10 two-camera setups a day. You would think that that's enough. But this movie ended up being like over 2,000 setups. So we used every single day. I mean, we were literally behind the 8 ball the entire time. And it's amazing to think, you shoot a movie for, first 100 days. You would think I made 7 in probably 65 days or 67 days. And this movie there was like, every time you would shoot a day, there was like another day's worth of inserts to do. It was bogged. But, you learn that stuff. Making movies ultimately is a wholly subjective thing. And again, there is no way to make a movie that's not subjective. You have to make decisions about what the behavior is, and you have to sort of work with what dramatically works. The cab shot is one of those moments that people seem to really remember in the movie. And the idea here was to have this sense of both detachment, God's POV looking down on something that he has no control over, and also this way of you're both locked onto what's happening and powerless to change it. It's one of those great moments where you have an idea for a scene, and you're gonna need coverage, and the guy's got to eat, and you go, oh man, this is gonna be a nightmare. And you come in, you shoot the master, and the master's so good, and the timing of it works so well, you just go, well, that goes in the movie, that's fine, we'll move on. We don't need close-ups of anybody, we'll be okay. I didn't prep this movie in the same way that I've prepped other movies. I didn't do any storyboards. I didn't want to do any storyboards. I did some previs for the murder sequences just so that people could have an idea of what we were going to see, the extent of what we were going to see. But for the most part, it was kind of, I think we want to be here for this. I think we want to, and I was trying to, this movie is very simply staged. And that was always the guiding principle. It's like, we've got to do this in a way that is, it's not about being meat and potatoes. It's about being, I don't want people to be distracted from anything that the characters are saying. It was a very conscious decision to, we don't want any artifice. We don't want to underline anything cinematically. We want to just present behavior and see where it leads the viewer. So the music montage was something that I wanted to do. We'd done the Transamerica building, and we'd shown passage of time in different ways. But I wanted to have a real mass culture reference in transporting us forward 4 years. And so the idea was to do this montage purely of audio, of different songs, and to finally take the movie from mono to stereo, since, 6-track stereo only really kind of came on the scene with Star Wars. So we were moving forward to 1976, 1977, and so what I wanted to do was sort of open up the surrounds and kind of stretch the audience forward and, let them know the movie is not over. In fact, this is, in some ways, the midpoint, which I'm sure elicited groans from test audiences. But I felt it was important, and I liked it as a way of telling the story. This is the first scene that we shot with Mark and with Jake. And this is in San Francisco on an overcast day. And we shot 56 takes to get the timing of this right, to get one actor to hand off to the other actor to hand off to the... And I think that they thought I was insane. But to get this thing to happen really simply, and without any kind of... I just didn't want to have to cut between them. I just wanted them to present what they'd been up to and what their thought process was without any... This, I think we only did 22 takes, the second shot in the scene. But the first one, I think, was 56.
He didn't announce his murders anymore, Dave. He was just going to do them.
Do you know what the chances of us arresting someone are now? Too much time has gone by.
I look at it this way. I want to be able to cut where it serves the story the best. I don't want to have to cut because somebody fucks up a line or because the camera shakes, or I don't want to have to cut on things I don't want to have to cut on. I want to be able to cut a scene where I feel like... And so, and that can often be difficult because a lot of times, I think, depending on the kind of discipline that you have or the kind of discipline that you've developed, different directors work different ways. Some of them are happy to let the material dictate where it's going. And I think that's... There are certain scenes in this movie where that was okay. There's certain scenes where they're in a coffee shop and they're chatting away, and sometimes it works in one and sometimes it works in coverage, but for the most part, it's the succinct nature of how they're delivering the information, and how, because so much of it has to do with making sure that you don't lead people to the wrong conclusions or the right conclusions too early, or worse, the right conclusions too late. So it's all about that parsing out of information, and so that's a difficult thing. My aesthetic has always been sort of tied to the Gordon Willises of the world, the Jordan Cronenweth, the Conrad Halls, the James Wong Howe's, the people who took risks. And the story became the context for the lighting, and the lighting helped create the context for the story at the same time. And so you're looking for the people who, it's an innate thing. I don't know how to, Darius has this, he has an emotional response to light and scene, and so I've tried desperately to... We went way out of our way to get him to shoot the movie because he's kind of more known in Paris as being a sort of a fashion, French perfume cinematographer. He's done a lot of that kind of stuff. But I thought if you take that sensibility and his sensitivity and turn it and unleash it on a cop movie, there's going to be something in there that's going to be different. I think it's very important for a filmmaker to announce their thesis. I think that if I have a thesis, it is that if I'm going to make movies with violence in it, the violence is going to be real. It's not going to be the drama in the movie. My process is the process of limiting. It's the blinders that you put on it. So what I try to do is, instead of thinking of everything that I'm going to do, is try and figure out the rules to determine the things that I'm not going to do, or things that I'm not going to be able to do. I think you have to embrace your limitations, not only as a individual, but also as your budget. What it can do. Screenplays are funny things because they're invariably the things that you like about them are in a way kind of the gaps in logic and the rough edges and the leaps that characters kind of make. That is far more valuable than any kind of honing or planing or sanding that you can kind of do to make the thing smooth. That you invariably lose some of the human and tactile, living qualities that screenplays have. And I was convinced at the beginning that this was a script that really worked because it was a kind of three different ideas. It was a buddy movie, and then it sort of jettisoned that idea, and then it became this movie about tracking the serial killer, and then it jettisoned that idea, and it really became about how do the innocents and how do the experienced and how do the zealots deal with evil. The thing that you learn from doing commercials is that you learn to be specific. You learn to look at something with what is the goal. You're constantly doing that because you've got 30 seconds. You learn the discipline of saying, this is the reason that we are all here today. You learn to be able to define that for yourself. You're here today to make the donuts look good, or you're here today to make the tires look grabbier. My feeling is that a music video is more like a song than it is like a movie. There's an abstraction. Music affords an abstraction. You have a bass line, and you have a drum beat, and you have the math. You have the bed of math. You have the graph paper on which you can draw anything. And then your melody line becomes this. It can be anything. It can go anywhere. It can do anything. You can talk about anything. It's poetry. And that's what the pictures need to be in a music video. And they don't have to create a context for understanding because the context is MTV. That is the context for understanding. So anything can happen. I'm not that experienced in making movies, so I don't profess to actually know how they're done. I know how to direct scenes, and I know how to direct sequences. I know how to put that stuff together. To say that I could pre-visualize a 2-hour movie is a lie. I don't have the attention span for it. I don't have the experience to be able to say, trust me, this will work here, and this will. I'm literally winging it. I think anybody who says that they aren't, I would like to meet them. I'm interested in a different kind of cinematic experience. I think that movies, if you feel something and if you are engaged intellectually and you see something in the people on screen that you recognize in yourself and what they're trying to do makes sense to you, then that's a good movie-going experience. I think, our responsibility is bring people into the dark and make them feel something. And I don't think our responsibility is always to pander to tying it up in a nice, neat little package. Sometimes you can't make it make sense. Here's the tricky thing. You're making a movie, and the audience knows you have control over everything that somebody sees and hears for 2 hours. Every single thing. And the audience knows that you can show them anything. That you've got computers and you can make Tyrannosaurus Rex eat a car. So they know you can do anything. So the question is, what don't you do? Not what do you do? Every time you go to a close-up, the audience knows subconsciously that you've made an editorial decision, that you said, look at this is important. Well, in a movie like this where everybody's lying, you can run an audience ragged by showing them things that are supposedly important, because everything that's a close-up is important, whether it's important or not. When you cut to a close-up of somebody's face, you're going in for a reason. You're doing it for a reason. There's no choice in the matter. I mean, it's not like you can say, oh yeah, well no, I meant to do it on this one, but this one. It's like, well, you can do it as a red herring, or you can do it, you can do it before you really want to set up what it is that you really want to do, or you can do it afterwards, and but every time you underline something, and a close-up is an underlining of something, every time you do that, the audience becomes aware of it, and they start to catalog those things, because they know that this movie is going to have suspense and mystery in it, and they're starting, and you don't want to exhaust that. So one of the And you know that you're getting to, by page 60, you're getting to a moment where you're going to go, all of that stuff was bullshit. So you have to be very, very cautious and careful about when you choose to do it. My tact on it was I wanted to present in as wide a frame and in as unloaded a situation point of view as possible, as much of a kind of just simple proscenium way. This is what's going on. This is what this guy sees, and to experience the movie through Michael Douglas, and you have to be so cautious of doing too much cinematic engineering. I didn't want to cut the movie's cut a little bit more than I wanted it to. Certainly in scenes with Deborah. Deborah, she had a lot of very complicated things to do in terms of the wine spilling, and and we had to take Michael's shirt off him between takes and get him a new suit. Every time, that kind of stuff. So that scene's cut a lot more than I wanted to. I wanted it to play in a moving master as much as possible until she gets reprimanded by the maitre d'. But we ended up having to shoot coverage. And but the idea, the style of the movie was to do something that was much more open and much simpler, so that you kind of go, the director's job is to cast these actors, give them the lies to come in and say, and have them come in and say them as convincingly as possible, and not to, you cut to somebody's face, the audience knows that you've taken some time out, you've done something, you've lost something, you've gone to something that excises other aspects of the room to showcase this one thing. There's something behind it. There's a reason. Whatever the reason is, if it's not clear at the moment, it'll be made clear later. So it puts this importance on it. You have to be very careful about how much importance you put on anything, because everything is going to add up. Everything is, the audience is cataloging it all. So, it's a tricky movie in that respect, and maybe I'm overthinking it, but I always felt like, what you really want to do is get out of the way of the material and not do too many kind of telling, kind of push in on the keys, or too many telling kinds of close-ups of things. You're stringing together a bunch of pearls. I mean, every scene it has to fit into the whole, but
do you think you could meet
it also,
somewhere?
I mean, I guess the more you've done it, the more you cut scenes together and see them play out. If you can keep a specific idea of what its purpose is, and don't try to mutate what's happening to solely fit the purpose. Because you want it, you want the building blocks, you want each brick to be in its right place, but they don't always have to be the same shaped brick. You know what I mean? It can be kind of fucked up. That's what makes it live. That's what gives it life. So you want inspiration, but you don't want tangential thinking. There are times when actors will bring something to you that's based on where they are in their personal life, or the worst case is that when you're dealing with people who, my job is to make people secure in what it is that they're doing at the moment, even though in their lives they may not necessarily be secure. You do oftentimes run into situations with actors where they're going, I've done this too much, or I've done that, and you got to be able to kind of coach them to go, no, that's part of your journey as a human being, but that's not part of the journey of this movie. So you need to keep your eyes focused on these 2 or 3 things in any given scene. That where you start to become manipulative is when you're thinking solely in terms of what the narrative is supposed to do and the journey that the audience is supposed to be on. The actor's job is to be selfish of their character. They're the experts in who they are and what they're trying to do. My job, my expertise is in how it fits into the whole. And if you start to mutate what they're bringing to it so that it only serves the narrative, then you're bereft of characterization. And characterization, life is what happens while you're making other plans. The life, the thing that makes the tapestry of it is not the perfection, and how it's the rough edges. That's the thing that makes people go. That's the thing that makes people relate to it on a human level. That's the thing that makes an audience member sitting and go, I understand why he took that little beat. I understand that little inflection. I understand that that's me in there. So it's a juggling act, and a lot of, you're shooting a lot of takes, and you're shooting. So if it goes off in a direction that's kind of interesting, explore it. And if it goes off in a direction that's defeating the purpose of the scene, those one or two or three things that a scene is about and how it supports the narrative, then you got to rein it in. But it isn't your job to, you would be stifling the things that you will later, if you're lucky, take credit for by saying, no. Remember, this is only about this. You know what I mean? It's about that, but it's also about, the diner scene is not only about the narrative of Tracy stepping outside the threesome to divide information and say, it's not only about, I'm going to tell you a secret that my husband doesn't know, which is in and itself a narrative concern, because at the end of the movie, Somerset has to look at Mills and understand that he doesn't know this information and be in incredible emotional pain about the fact that he knew something that Mills didn't know. But it's also about how those two people relate and the relationship that they're building. So the things that actually work to the rough edges that make the relationship work have to be there as well as the narrative beats. But certainly the scene is about, Tracy saying, I don't want to live here. I don't know if I can. And I'm going to tell you something that even my husband doesn't know. Those are the two things that have to happen. But how they happen and how, Somerset divulges his secret and tells you is the prerogative of the people that are in the movie. Not the characters, but the people that are actually playing those characters. So they're going to come to it with, it's stone soup, That's what you're hoping for. So if you try to control it too much, it'll just make you miserable. If you have to realize that it's going to be imperfect, that, the best laid plans. But that imperfection is ultimately the thing that's...
Movies are like haircuts, They seemed like a good idea then, and you just don't want to see a picture of it later on. It's like fashion changes and things change, and your face changes, and the things that you want from it isn't important anymore. I have a very different opinion of what the life of a movie is. I used to think that it was all about its first release. Get the film to the premiere, wash your hands of it, and then see how it does in its first kind of circle of the globe. And I honestly don't feel that anymore. I honestly feel like you read a script and it becomes a film for you in your head, and then and there's no faces attached to it, or maybe there are. Maybe you read it with actors in mind, but you're reading it with this kind of ideal. You're seeing this ideal. This person's able to bring X, Y, and Z to this thing, and then you cast the movie and you go into rehearsals, and then it takes on a different life. It takes on the reality of, well, you've got to tell the story, and you have this much time, and you have to do this and this and this, and people, you're catching somebody at a time in their life when this thing that you're counting on them bringing to it that they've brought to this other project that's similar or whatever, they don't want to explore that anymore. They're done with that. They're finished. They've sloughed that off. And so they're moving on to this other thing. And all of a sudden, and sometimes what they're doing, where they're going, is better than what you have in mind. So you incorporate that, but that changes the balance of this whole other thing. So rehearsals a movie changes. Then you go to shoot it. And now you're taking all of those possibilities, and you're taking all of this potential, and you're compressing it and forcing it, in this kind of box of time. So you're kind of, you time and reality compress this thing into the exploration of one or two of these ideas that heretofore have been sort of limitless. And then you cut it, and it becomes a completely different movie. Because now you're losing things in terms of not where an actor can go, but what an audience will sit still for, with regards to where an actor wants to go or where a performance wants to go. How much of it is necessary and how much of it is unnecessary. Now there's this whole other constraint, this narrative storytelling essential kind of box, gets put around it. So the box has gotten smaller and smaller. It's changed every time. It's become this different thing. Then you put the music on it, and it becomes a different movie. It evolves into this other thing. And then you put it in front of an audience, premiere audience in front of it. And these are all agents and producers and other actors and other film directors. And they all watch it. But they're watching it from this whole, they got off work early to come to go see your thing. And they had to walk past all these people who took their pictures. So there's all these weird kind of tensions that go into that. So this movie has this whole other life. And then 6 weeks after the movie opens, it's in the, dollar theaters or whatever on Beverly Boulevard, and you go in and you see it with 15 people in the room. They're bringing a completely different thing to it. They're not paying $8 to see it, they're paying $2 or whatever, and they're seeing it in the middle of the afternoon, and they're expecting less or different or more or something else from it than the people who saw it at the premiere or the people who saw it when they were supposed to judge it at the preview screenings. The movie then goes to Laserdisc. 10 years later, people look at it and they haven't seen the trailers, and they're not being hyped by the print ads, and they're not being promised these things. And all of a sudden, they're watching the movie. They're finally 10 years later watching the movie the way you first read the script, which is with zero expectation and with no understanding. So movies never stop having a life. Whereas I used to think, I'm working towards premiere night. I'm working towards that showing. It's like now I'm feeling more like you do what you think's right. You're trying to make something that's the truest expression of what it is, and then get out of the way and get back and stop worrying about it and stop. I take as much responsibility as I can for my actions while I'm actually doing it, and then I try to let it go as quickly and as completely as possible.
We tested the movie. It was all handled by the Columbia marketing distribution people. And I remember saying specifically, let's be really careful about showing this movie to an audience, saying, from the director of Seven and Fight Club and starring the Academy Award-winning actress and star of Silence of the Lambs. You're going to be promising a kind of a movie that's different than what this is. This movie is an entertainment. This movie is designed as a sort of fastball down the center of the plate. And it should be rough around the edges, and it should be a little uncompromised, and it should be a little harder to love. And they said, yeah. And so they went out and said, do you want to see the new movie from the director of Seven and Fight Club, starring the star of Silence of the Lambs? And they had a bunch of people there who were expecting to see Seven crossed with Fight Club, crossed with Silence of the Lambs. And so this movie was too light for them. And that was a lot of the comments that we heard. If you're going to make this kind of an entertainment, you should have Forrest get away. And it's that same old thing you get with a focus group, which is a little bit of power is a little too much power. If people wanted to choose the ending of their movies would be a lot cheaper, because you wouldn't have to get people who make movies to make them. You could get anybody to make them. And the fact is that sometimes what the audience wants is not the best thing for the story in the end, And it can be different for, if you screen a movie at 4 p.m, there's a different expectation for that 2-hour period than there is if you screen a movie at 10 o'clock at night. It's a different thing. You can't, you're never going to please everybody, and you're never going to give everyone what they want. So you kind of have to be able to go, okay, well, this is a valid criticism and this isn't. The definitely kind of threw everybody at the studio, and they wanted desperately to reshoot the ending so that Forrest got away. But I couldn't really stomach that. It just seemed like it would be wussing out. If there's anything that we learned from the test screening of this movie specifically, it was that we didn't have to dot all the I's as specifically as we thought. That the audience was willing to roll with it, and that if positioned as a movie, they were willing to suspend the necessary disbelief in order to make this ride work. But the movie was pretty. I think our first cut was 1:57 or something. I think it only came down like 4 minutes, 2 minutes or something. The value of any kind of a preview screening is to see your movie and see the backs of 400 people's heads. So you can see where they're getting bored. You can see where they're confused. You can see when they get restless. You can feel all that stuff. You don't have to put an E-meter on everybody in the audience. You can get it. I mean, you're a reasonably perceptive individual. You can sit in the back of a theater and watch a movie that you made with an audience and know the stuff that you can change and stuff that you can't change. And you have a really good idea of the material that's available, and you can kind of feel when you're losing him. So all that stuff, I think it's valuable for that. I think it's valuable to sit there and watch people watch your movie, because at some point you're going to have to, and you can learn from them. And it doesn't matter how intricately something's planned or how beautifully it's carried off if the audience doesn't understand it. And they have to be able to understand it, or enough of them have to be able to understand it in order to make it a viable commercial proposition. But aside from that, I think it is the byproduct of our kind of corporate culture and the vertical integration of media companies, where we sit there and we go, we can put it in front of a focus group and they can tell us what's the best way to present the idea that we initially loved to them. If you're going in looking for them to save you and to give you something that would never have occurred to you, it's probably not going to happen. And quite honestly, a movie is a movie. It's like at the time you do the rough cut, you're going to refine it, you're going to make it better. But that's pretty much what it is. You're not going to take Leprechaun and turn it into Chicago with a couple more weeks of editing. And no matter how much, the audience goes, it would really be great if they sang and danced.
So there you go, man. I hope you enjoyed hearing from David Fincher. He really is a revolutionary filmmaker in the horror genre for sure. And I was thrilled to be able to put that talk of his on our show. Next week, number 186, a director by the name of James Quinn will be on the show. Talking to him tomorrow morning, actually, all the way from Austria. It will be an interesting conversation. He's done a series of horror films, and he is promoting his next one that looks very good. So I look forward to that. And then after that, we will have the hosts of Sinister Creature Con and the promoters of Sinister Creature Con on to close out our countdown to Sinister Creature Con. So I am excited, man, that we're pretty much on the road to the best convention around. And I think that this Father's Day weekend is going to be pretty rad for everybody involved, and for you guys as well, as you guys will get to experience all of it, whether you watch it on Facebook, YouTube, or listen to it right here. A bunch of cool panels coming your way from Sinister Creature Con Spring. Anyway, thank you for listening to this show. Stay tuned. We have a Campfire Chronicles as we cover Hellraiser, and we have a Nerdageddon show with a panel from the Fox Showcase with the cast talking Dark Phoenix, which is around the corner from coming out. So, full week of podcasting on the Horrific Network this week. Hope you enjoy it. Thank you again for listening one more time, and we will see you next week.